Hello and welcome to episode 431 of the Crate and Crowbar, a gaming podcast being recorded on a Saturday, unusually, Saturday the 20th of January 2024. I'm Marsh Davis, and this irregular recording time affords us the pleasurable company of game developer and powerful wizard, Tom Francis.
Hello.
Welcome, Tom.
Hi.
It's been a while since you were last on.
Yeah, that's because weekdays are not usually good for me because it's 10:30 a.m. here, and on a weekday that's not so good.
So I should ask you, since it's been a while, as well as reminding everyone that they can vote in the Crate and Crowbar Community's Game of the Year 2023 awards, the link for which will be in our show notes. I thought I'd begin by asking you, maybe not what your best game of 2023 was, but what were the games that you've been playing since you were last on?
Well, my best game of 2023, since you asked, is
okay. Well, you can.
It's Tears of the Kingdom for sure. Absolutely loved it. It was such a surprise for it to be so my jam when Breath of the Wild wasn't.
Really?
Because I figured, like, even if it was a great game and you know did all the things it set out to do, that since I didn't really click with Breath of the Wild, I probably wouldn't click with this. But yeah, to me, like all the emergent stuff, all the systemic stuff in Breath of the Wild didn't really come to the fore. It was like there if you prodded it to find it, but it didn't lead. As I went around the world, I wasn't using emergent solutions to solve problems. The problems that came up just seemed to be ones that I should solve with a sharp stick. Whereas Tears of the Kingdom is just absolutely goes mad with it, and you know everything can be solved by building some mad contraption and bolting, like cutting down a forest and bolting every tree together to make a giant stick, and just is just constantly saying yes to you. Every harebrained idea you have is like, yep, that works. Yep, okay, that works. And every weird oddball solution you can come up with, no matter how like inefficient and time consuming it might be to do it, when it does eventually work, I find that extremely validating as a person. Like I realize that this is like something I get out of games when it's probably the main reason I like emergent games in the first place, and things that have a lot of freedom of approach. Is it's not just that I want to like have a varied time with it and try different things. It's that when I go about a problem in a really weird way that's very like me and avoid direct conflict, come up with some sort of cunning or weird plan, even if it takes forever, and even if I could have just solved it more simply, straightforwardly, when the game says yes to it, when it works, it's like validating who I am as a person. It's like, yep, you're good. You're weird, but the thoughts you have are correct.
I'm so interested that you didn't jibe with the first game, but like the second one. So what is it about those emergent things were possible in the first game? I remember there being loads of videos coming out which showcased players doing crazy stuff. But how do they make that more accessible, or there is a greater invitation to engage with that stuff in the second game? How have they managed that?
Yeah, I don't know if I agree that the same amount of systemic emergent stuff was in the first game, because the building stuff in Tears of the Kingdom is just a game changer. It's just like, it's Gary's mod, and nothing like that was in the first game, and that's what I'm using all the time. That's what all my wacky solutions are. Just I build something, I get out the ultra hand, and I bolt this to this, and I add this to this. It's just even things like it operates on every level of scale. You can make those massive walking mechs or whatever. Presumably, I've seen videos of that. I have never done it, and I have made like war machines of a sort. Mine are much more hodgepodge and random, but I got through an arena fight by sort of building a battle balcony into the walls of the arena and mounting guns on it, and just like setting up like shelters for myself so that arrows couldn't rain down on me, and breaking line of sight to the enemy, and then mounting like laser guns and cannons and stuff, and just whittling them down over and over again. So there's like large scale solutions, and then there's tiny things of just like inside a puzzle shrine. I'm like on this platform, and I need this other platform to move up that's above me because it's blocking me. Like I can move the one I'm on, but I can't move the one above me. And so I've got some weapons in my inventory. I just drop like a poleaxe and a sword, and then I glue them to each other, and then I glue them to the ground, and now they're wedged between those two platforms so that when one goes up, the other one goes up. And I'm sure that's not the solution to the shrine, but it's like, that should work, so it works. So yeah, there's just, because it operates on everything. It works on weapons, it works on physics objects, it can interact with enemies. An enemy that there's these big ogre guys who like fall asleep, and when they fall asleep, their weapon is becomes separate from them. It's lying by by their side, that's a physics object. So you can like pick that up and steal it, or you could like you could glue some like TNT to their club so that then when they try and attack you, they'll blow themselves up, things like that. It's just run through every level. Whereas like for me, Breath of the Wild is like, you can make a round grenade or a square grenade. And there was all that, like the stasis thing, I think was probably the most emergent thing, where you sort of freeze something in place, then all the physics forces that are applied to it will all be applied at once. That always felt weird to me. It wasn't satisfying to use. It just felt wrong to hit something and have no response to it and then have a huge response to it. And I know you can use it to shoot yourself over Hyrule Castle and speedrun the game in 8 minutes or whatever, but I'm never going to do that. That just requires precision and iteration and endless perfectionism. And that's not really what I want from an emergent game. I want to like mess around and just have this feeling of like, whatever you can dream up, there's probably a way to make it work.
And you can, presumably, like you're describing, almost entirely circumvent puzzles.
Yeah. That's. I think that's why, all the stuff I said is the basis of a good game. But I think what makes me like really love it is that feeling of it letting you circumvent things, and just because they know you can do it, and you also know like they don't intend for you to do it. Like it's just forbidden enough. I think if the game was like, if the whole game was like, you must circumvent the puzzles because the puzzles are impossible, or the combat is impossible or whatever, then I wouldn't get the same pleasure out of circumventing it because I'm meant to circumvent it. I need to feel like the game wants me to not circumvent it, but allows me to circumvent it.
Does that not scare you as a puzzle game designer?
No, I think because you usually do know about them as a developer, so you always have a choice of like, do we want to prevent this or not? There are sometimes things where it's like, to prevent this, it means shutting off these other things that are legitimate. There's one in Tactical Breach Wizards that I'm still a little bit torn over, where it's possible to exploit a certain ability. I guess I won't detail it because A, it wouldn't make much sense to people who haven't played the game, and B, it's forbidden knowledge. You don't want to know it. Once you know it, it's like, can I make myself not exploit this? And so I'm really going back and forth on whether to just outright forbid it, because it's hard to come up with like a global rule that would prevent this without preventing some other fun solutions. So I'm erring on the side of like allowing the fun solutions, and that means either allowing the exploit solution, or coming up with a slightly Weasley rule about, well, it usually works, but in this one situation, there's some quirk of the magic that means you can't keep doing this over and over. But yeah, those things, that's very rare. Most of the time in Wizards, it's just like, what usually happens is you realize like, there's a perk for the Navy Seer where every time an ally uses their main attack, he also gets an attack on that target. If he can shoot them, he will, and it's just free. And initially that was just infinite. It can happen as many times as you like. And then you realize, he can give actions to people. So they can spend their action and then kind of get a free action from him as well. And then if there's another way to get that guy mana over and over, he can keep giving them actions, and it spirals into to a very overpowered strategy. And so all we did was just make it so that that perk by default only triggers once per turn. But then there's another perk you can get once you have it to upgrade it to trigger an infinite amount of times per turn. So the overpowered strategy is still in there. It just costs you ultimately 2 perk points to get there. So it's like, if there's going to be something like that that's a bit crazy, then rather than remove it, we'll just make it a bit more expensive and make you really like work towards it.
That seems like a good solution. I mean, you could also have your characters shame the player for using it.
That's genuinely what one of the things we're considering for that exploit one is like, we can detect if you're doing this, so we might just like let you do it, but then have the character say, well, this seems kind of boring.
Yeah, cool. What else have you been playing then?
Lately I've been playing Tchia, which is a game I've been meaning to get to for ages, which is an open world game set in New Caledonia by some devs who are from there. Which is a Pacific island, I want to say, with a very sort of unique mix of people and culture. And this is this like, you play as a young girl whose father is kidnapped by some rugs. There's the enemies. There was a villain. There was a guy. I don't really remember what he was like, but I remember his henchmen were kind of like carpet people. And that's the only like, well, no. the in general the world is quite. It reminds me of Just Cause. It's like a rolling foresty island with beaches and beautiful seas and just lots of people in villages and NPCs to talk to and little quests to do. And it feels very grounded in real world. And then I think I've only actually encountered this once, but just once I came across like a little camp of carpet people who were just. I can't actually fully remember what they looked like, but the picture I have in my head from memory is a bit like the playing card people from Alice in Wonderland. But imagine that, but of Brugg. And I came across a little encampment of them. They're all ill-advisedly standing around a fire because fire turns out to be the only thing that can kill them. And there's loads of little oil lamps around their camp. And basically combat in this game, to the extent that it exists, is you find some fiery stuff and you throw it at them. And, there's a few of them, so you've got to manage the economy of fiery things to throw at them. But it has the feel of like a Far Cry outpost, so you can kind of come at it from any angle, and it's just out there in the open world. It's not a mission or anything. Well, there is like a little mission that pops up when you start doing it. But what's weird about it is like I just found the one of them, and I played this game for probably 6 to 8 hours. And so it seems to have like a whole Far Cry-ish combat system and open world outposty thing that only comes up sort of 1% of your playtime.
Oh, wow.
The main thing that's sort of the banner feature of the game is that you can possess almost anything. So this is just an ability that your character sort of develops spontaneously. But she can sort of jump into like a fish or a passing deer, or even just a rock or a coconut. And everything is it's extremely generous game. Like it just kind of wants you to have fun. So even when you're possessing a rock, when you try and move, you tumble forwards, and with quite some speed. I think you're actually faster as a rock than you are in your human form, because you're just sort of like a physics object that can just accelerate with wild abandon. And then also, anytime you're possessing something that would normally be inanimate, you can sort of aim a kind of throw with it, I guess. You sort of throw yourself, and that launches the object and also depossesses it, I believe. So you sort of like, you launch as the coconut and you fly over a building or whatever, and then you become yourself as you sort of arrive. It's an insane game for like a small team to have made, because it's an open world game, which is just difficult in the first place. It's got jungle and cities and every kind of terrain. Then they've got to make all these animals, which is that's what Ubisoft has a whole studio for. Is just making the animals for all their open world games. And so it's a crazy thing to do as an indie team. But then also you can possess any of these animals. So they've all got to like feel good when you control them, which I'm sure must be a completely different set of challenges to making a creature that just animates well, that just looks all right when it walks around. And they're not like radically different to each other. If you possess a cat and then possess a dog, I don't think that they feel dramatically different gameplay wise. But they still have to animate well, and just like a character controller is a different thing to an NPC controller.
Is there a point to possessing the animals? Or is it
I have
just the pleasure of being in a different body with a different traversal system?
Yeah, I've been mostly using it for transport. So anything flying is great. You can just like soar over the land and get to where you're going really, really fast. Although, as I say, almost everything is much, much faster than you. Possessing fish is great for going underwater, and like I've got to get some pearls for a quest, and you run out of air pretty quickly. So possessing a fish is a nice way to get down deep, and then you sort of unpossess them to grab the pearl, and then try and repossess a fish to get back up. Most creatures have something unique they can do. With a fish, it's usually just I think they call it sprint, which is not strictly accurate, but swim real fast for a little while. Boars can like snuffle around in the dirt, like sort of dig, I think, and presumably find treasures in some situations, but I don't think I've actually hit one of those. Some things will have like a leap action they can do. So there hasn't been a lot of like gate and key type stuff of like, you must be a boar to pass this thing, or you're going to need an animal that can bite to solve this puzzle, because it's so open world and it's so freeform. Almost all the quests I've had are just like, get 5 pearls and a grass trinket and a live chicken and this, and then you just go off and just find those things out in the open world and pursue it in a very open-ended way. So yeah, the animals I've just mostly used for getting around and for fun. I did possess a steak that somebody was barbecuing and then just like flop around their little like open air kitchen and freak them out and then sort of like hop over their fence and just like run off free into the wilderness.
So there's some kind of strange metaphysical questions about possessing something that is very dead. Like, for some reason, that's more troubling to me than possessing something that was never alive, like a stone.
It is weird, isn't it? Like, I had that feeling when I was doing it. I was like, this is especially strange, even for me. There's a very cute touch of anytime you possess anything to sort of, I guess this wasn't strictly necessary from a sort of readability point of view, but your character has a little flower behind her ear, and whatever you possess also has a little flower behind its ear. So like a fish will just have a little daisy on the side of it. And presumably the steak had a flower on it somewhere. I didn't notice it.
How did you play this? Because it's not out on Steam until March. Was it already released on Epic or something?
I'm playing it on PlayStation. Actually, I didn't know it wasn't out on PC. But yeah, it's good on the controller. And it's a very like sweet and warm game. There's a lovely sort of sense of kind of community with it. Like you sort of come from a small island community, and then the villages you go to are kind of, each one is kind of a self-contained community. There's a little running joke going on with the two that I'm interacting with at the moment, where each of them keeps telling me like, oh, we have nothing against these other guys, but they hate us. So, it's really a shame that we have to be at war. And then the other villagers saying the exact same thing about them. Like, oh, we have nothing against them, but they seem to hate us. So you often, almost always when you arrive in a village or you meet an NPC or something, they will play a song or sing a song. And you have a little, is it a banjo or a mandolin? I can't remember.
Ukulele, according to the Steam
description. Thank you. You have one of them, and there is a little music mini game to play along with the song that the person is singing, and that is really effective. I don't normally like music games; just have a bad sense of rhythm, and I usually feel like what I'm doing is not really playing the song. I'm just playing a mini game, and that causes the song to play. And if I fuck it up, it'll make a bad noise, and that's it. And this is one of the only ones where I do feel like I'm playing it, I guess because it is like folk music where there's very few instruments. So I am one of the only things that is making any noise at all. So it just feels very authentic. And I'm doing it. I'm very much like role playing it because it's very chill. It's very generous. You don't have to pass this segment. You can't fail it. You do get a score at the end for how accurate you were, but there's also just a button to just have Tchia just take over and just play it herself, and that has fed into the role-playing part of it and made it sort of even more I don't know, just really lands for me, because I will stumble through the song as best I can. Like, it's a song your character doesn't know, so it feels right that she stumbles with it at first. Like, she can play her instrument, but she's never heard the song before, so she's just kind of going with the prompt and trying to follow the lead of whoever's singing with you. And I'll fumble a bit, and then I'll get the hang of it, and then usually it gets a bit harder, and then I'll fumble that a bit, and then I'll get the hang of that part. And then at some point, my fingers just get tired, and I hit the autoplay button, and I just get to sit back and like just enjoy the song. Because if I had to play the whole thing, I would just be like, it would just get annoying, and then my fingers would get tired, and I have RSI, so it's especially aggravating if I have to sort of keep doing the same actions again and again after I'm done with the gameplay enjoyment of it. So I love that you can just press a button and say, yeah, I'm done with this. I'm happy that I've had my fun with it, and now Tchia can take it from here. And that also fits with the role-playing part of it. Of like, she's a skilled musician, so there's this, after that stumbling, faltering phase, she just gets the hang of it, and then she can do it. There's no effort, and the fact that I'm not putting any effort as a player matches the fact that she can just sort of play it from there, and those just feel really nice.
It looks quite complicated. There's like sort of like a dial from which you can select notes and keys.
Yeah, it's really just you push the thumbstick in the right direction and then press the button as the notes hit from that direction. But it does get very fast very quickly. So you're quickly in a situation where like they're coming in from multiple angles seemingly at the same time, which would be impossible to do exactly at the same time. So you're having to rapidly flick the stick between two things and and hit it.
Is there sort of eco message to the game? There's like pictures of glowering factories as well as
Yeah,
beautiful
I think there's going
archipelagos.
to be. I haven't got to that yet. I went to a big corporate sort of place to try and confront the villain, I think, and got turned away. And now I don't really remember how that relates to what I'm doing now, but that led to me needing to get some tributes together for um, local folks I need to impress to get them on my side to, I guess, go back there. And that whole place had a vibe of like a polluting company. There was a big factory next to it. It does. I will say, I am shocked that an indie team attempted this. I won't claim that they completely pulled it off in terms of having a world that can render both jungle and city accurately, because those are such different things. I mean, even Just Cause it's the one time that Just Cause doesn't feel wildly technically accomplished, is when you go to the cities and you think, you can tell that it's hard to make the same engine do both these things. And the cities in this are very kind of bare bones and feel a bit ropey, but I've had to spend almost no time in them so far. So most of it's just going through a beautiful jungle and also sailing on the open ocean. Like there's, I really like the way the boat works, where it's, again, wildly generous. You can go insanely fast in any direction, regardless of wind, with a single sail. But all it does is controlling the strength of the sail and steering the boat are two separate like control stations on the raft. So you need to manually sort of unhook yourself from one and move over to the other. So you pick up speed, then go back to the tiller to steer, and then when you're trying to get going, especially in like a narrow riverway, there's this. It's almost like a little risk reward game of like, how fast do I dare go and still expect to be able to get back to the controls and steer around this shit at the speed that I'm now going.
It looks beautiful. I really like the character design. There's a good screenshot of Tchia underwater, and she's got these kind of big puffed out cheeks, like she's holding a lot of air in her mouth. Which is very I don't know. More games need that puffed out cheeks
and a little daisy behind your ear.
Yeah.
The cosmetic upgrades in this, the cosmetic unlocks in this, are great because they're all just like, they're just clothes that she might like to wear. They're not like wacky or out there. And my favorite thing I've unlocked is I can replace my perfectly good ukulele with like an oil can one. Which doesn't sound any different, but it's just really cute that it's just like an oil can with some strings.
Is it climbing in the game as well? It looks like it's climbing in the game.
Yeah, it's got the Zelda thing of like, there's a pretty short stamina meter. There's also like a hang gliding with a little parachute thingy, or paraglider. It's very Zelda in that sense, and you can upgrade your stamina by finding these stamina fruit that are just dotted around the world. And all that stuff again is super generous. You can find those pretty easily. Rather than like Zelda, it's actually quite a lot of work to upgrade your stamina. You got to do a ton of shrines, and then you got to choose that instead of health, and there's always a bit of a awkward tension of needing the health to get through boss fights but wanting the stamina more. And this is just like, you can just have it. Just find some cool fruit and eat it. And like food replenishes your possession meter. When you possess something, it's draining over time. But food is just free. You just, at any campsite you go to, you just like you choose to eat food, and then just like moves over to a scene of like a beautiful dish of food. The plate slides off the screen and then slides back finished. That's it. Which is it's such a good example actually of like, it's really efficiently done, because eating animations would be a lot of work, and certainly like trying to make the food disappear in the right way would be a ton of work. But just show the food, that's what we want. Like, you want to see the food, you want to think, oh, that looks nice, and then the empty plate just has a very satisfying like, wow, she really ate that fast.
This looks great. I really want to play it.
Yeah, it's really good. I'm like I say, I'm like 6 to 8 hours into it. I'm not like burning to sort of see it all the way through. Like I say, the plot I haven't totally hooked into it. I guess I'm curious to see about these little camps of rug people, or see if those if that develops, if I need to engage with that in a bigger way. It's somewhat interesting to sort of figure out how to efficiently do them, because there's flammable stuff around, and you can carry things in your inventory. Oh yeah, that reminds me. My sort of backup mode of transport is I carry a dog in my inventory because I don't know if you can do this with every animal, but you can pick up dogs, and when you're holding something in your hands, there's the option to just stow it. So you just like stow the dog in your inventory and it just kind of vanishes. And then when I need to get somewhere and I don't have a convenient like bird to possess or something, I just get the dog out, put him on the ground, possess him, and then bound around as the dog for a while. And then when I arrive at my destination or I run out of possession juice, come back out of the dog, pick him up, put him back in my inventory. But yeah, figuring out, I think that's sort of a potential problem with the combat side of things, is it's just a question of how many fiery things you have, and that's just a question of how many inventory slots you want to devote to it, and you need inventory slots to carry things that you need for quests, and so that kind of limit is usually not very fun. One thing I do really like about it is that there's always challenges around, like most open world games, can you dive off this platform in the perfect way? Can you I actually don't know what the other challenges are. I haven't done very many of them. But when you complete a challenge, you get a trophy, and the trophy is just a physical object in the level. It just like drops to the ground, and you can pick that up and stash it. And sometimes I've had quests where like a trophy of some kind is one of the sort of ingredients I need to make this tribute thing I'm trying to build. And so you just have to use up one of the trophies that you got for something. And if you already have the bronze trophy and you win the silver trophy, that's just another physics object. So I often just like have those like tumbling down. I need to pick something up. I'm down the inventory room, and I guess I'm just going to drop my gold trophy for diving. Just leave it in the sea here. You can also possess your trophies, of course.
Do they ambulate themselves?
It's got a very consistent approach, I would say, for rigid objects that are not animals or whatever. They are all going to just tumble and spin in the same way, and you just have this like this transport force that is unrelated to anything that the object is actually doing.
Does it? I mean, is there a reason why Tchia is able to possess objects that's given in the game?
It's magic, and she unlocks it early on. I have a feeling it might be implied that she's like, this has always been like dormant within her. I don't think she just gained it by like picking something up. I think she was like always special, because she's got these two different colored eyes, and one of them is very much the possession color, and I think it might like glow when you possess things. I can't remember, but I get the sense that is related to her power, and I think she's always had that. And so I think the idea is like she's always had this ability, and it only kind of unlocked when her dad was kidnapped, and it became urgent for her to do something about it.
Cool.
What have you been playing?
I've been playing a game which is in some ways superficially similar. I've been playing Jusant, or Jusant, as you might choose to pronounce it, which is also a climbing game, although Tchia isn't primarily a climbing game, I guess. But it's from Don't Nod, the people who did Life is Strange, amongst other things. It's set in this lost civilization that has encrusted the cliffs of a singular, massive, massive tower of coral and rock that rises from this desert. And as you are this young person of indeterminate gender, and you in a really cool outfit, and you climb it, and as you climb it, you begin to piece together some of the stuff about the world, and you realize that the tower was originally surrounded by an ocean, which explains all the shattered boats that you pass in the desert below. And clearly there's also an eco message here to some extent, or at least the climate has very obviously changed, and the life that was in this massive tower has slowly become untenable. All the people who used to live there have abandoned their livelihoods and left and gone across the desert seeking water elsewhere. But you have returned, and you have brought back with you some sort of little water goblin that you keep in a sack, which is very, very cute. It makes these beautiful little chirpy noises. It's got these big eyes. It does resemble a sort of bright blue Ballsack, but it's somehow more adorable than that sounds.
This is sounding like a very you companion. Well, Goblin looks like a Ballsack.
it's somewhere between a Ballsack and what are those kind of incredibly small creatures that live, microscopic creatures that look sort of like
tardigrades.
that. Yes, yeah, somewhere between a Ballsack and a tardigrade.
There's the title.
um, and at first I was a little resistant to it because there's something a bit sort of cheap about giving you a really cute companion creature. But by the end of the game, I would have fucking killed for that Ballsack. They operate with exactly the right. I don't know, the pitch of the chirrups keys into some instinct within me. Nurturing instinct, which is
now I'm really curious to see if Alex would get along with his companion, because I remember him being sort of malevolent towards. Was it the companion in Jedi Survivor or Jedi?
Yeah, BB. Is it BB-8 or is that one of the?
That's in the movie, I think. That's
okay.
the sphere in the movie.
BD. Is it BD? Oh, who cares? Anyway, yeah, I know the one you mean.
Yeah.
Alex has played this actually, so I should ask him what he made of the companion. But I think the thing that really turned it around for me is that you can use this companion, who is obviously in some way key to restoring the tower. He seems to have some kind of connection with it, and you can press the button, and this little goblin thing will clamber up from the sack on your back onto your shoulder, and then sit on your head in like what would be a lotus position if it had long enough arms, and sort of meditates on top of you. And you can look around the environment, and you can see where you need to go and where things are, because they're kind of highlighted by these mystic auras. But there's something really just pleasing about his little Zen pose as he's sitting on top of you.
Do you know? So you've like returned to this place. It sounds like maybe you've returned to this place because you've got the Ballsack goblin. Like he's why you come back to restore water, maybe, or is that something you know?
I mean, it's not clear what your purpose is specifically at the beginning, but I think that would be a very early guess as to what you're doing. Yeah, and there's quite. I mean, I've been playing a lot of games recently in the last year where you have, in fact, this shares quite a lot of similarities in like iconography with Chants of Sennaar, which I played last year, and also Cocoon. In that they're both like Cocoon is you are performing some vital role to the world you're in, but you don't understand it, and it's quite opaque, and it's a world with a different language and systems to what you are as a player familiar with. And that's true here. And also Chants of Sennaar, you're going through this culture which is organized again around a massive tower, which is in some way unknowable to you, and your purpose for doing so is unknowable to you at the beginning of the game. But both of those games are very good at motivating you to do the thing that you're doing without really knowing why you're doing it, even though your character in the world knows why they're doing it, presumably. And it's the same here.
Like climbing something is quite a nice sort of primal instinct of just show the player a big tall thing that they can climb. They're going to want to climb it.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty clear about which direction you're going to go in. It's helpful. But I mean, to talk about the climbing, I think it's like I don't know how Tchia manages it. You said it was a bit like the system in Zelda where there's like a stamina bar, right?
Yeah.
It's similar in this, except you control the grip of your left and right hand independently with the triggers, and your arms sort of reach out automatically for holds, but you can direct them more explicitly to some extent. And then you grip onto things and alternately you use the triggers to kind of move up and up the rock face, reaching for alternate holds. And you do have a stamina bar, which operates in quite a slightly more nuanced way than I think at least the first Zelda game had it, which is that the stamina bar does deplete with activity, but you can refill it by just resting on the rock face. You hold a button to specifically kind of relax. However, the whole bar also gets gradually smaller across the course of the climb, depending on what kind of actions you're taking. If you're like leaping, making big bold moves, big chunks of it are taken out essentially. So you do need to have a plan, even though there's quite a lot of forgiveness in terms of how the stamina is recouped. And you're roped up as well, which is different from a lot of the games I've played with climbing. And initially you rope up to the bottom of the climbing face, but then you can place like a limited number of pitons as you go, so that you can place them pretty much anywhere. But you
like quick saves.
Yeah, well, sort of. I mean, it is a quick save, but it also has a mechanical function as well. In that, if you fall, you hang from that point, and sometimes you do that intentionally because you can then swing from it, and you can either swing across gaps or you can run across the rock face to reach like some other handhold at the end of that arc. And the rope is also limited in length. And although that doesn't, it's odd actually because it only tests that really right at the end of the game, but it tutorializes it right at the beginning. I completely forgotten that was a thing that could happen. You could run out of rope, but it does eventually test you, and there are places where you'll need to find ways to sort of descend and unpick lower pitons that you placed in order to kind of reduce the rope length overall. And it's just it's really good.
Awesome. What's the thing I was going to ask is like, what if you're like roped to the bottom of the face and then you get to the top? How do you like get your rope back? Do you like? Does it just magically detach?
Yes. So you have this sort of. I mean, it's obviously a clever rope in some way. It unattaches and spools back in rapidly as well, and you can also fire it at points as well occasionally to latch onto certain things, but it sort of takes that some of the difficulties of climbing out of the kind of equation in order to kind of retain quite a lot of the tactile experience of climbing and the engagement of some of the things you need to think about, whilst also reducing the degree to which it is actually taxing you. So it feels like it wants you to experience climbing, but without too much of the challenge of it. I found it's not a difficult game by any means, but I found that the difficulty was judged well in that it found this sweet spot where it wasn't pushing back on you, but there was just enough friction for you to understand and be constantly engaged and thinking about what you're doing physically. Which is unusual. I've not found that with a lot of games. Either difficulty is often punishment. I feel in games, and there's ways in which you can engage with what you're being asked to do, which don't require failure being a part of it. I think.
Yeah, for sure. I actually, it was a while before I learned that there was anything like fantasy-ish about this game. Because it's so hard-coded in me that if a game is about something like climbing, then it is a simulation game designed to simulate climbing in the real world, and it would just be a straightforward simulation. Even though it's by Don't Nod, which would seem very out of character for them. I just thought, that's weird that they're making a pure simulation game without ever checking that it was a pure simulation game. But I think that's kind of interesting that it sort of probably speaks well of the game in the sense that like it's just very rare for a game to be so interested in one aspect of traversal in a fantasy context, without it being like, we want hardcore real life climbers to buy this, and the way that like Trucking Simulator and other sim games are just sort of like they live to serve the fantasy of the real thing. It's cool that they are interested in going in depth in that mechanic in a fantasy world, and it sounds like they actually it sounds like it's probably a better way to make a good game out of this mechanic if you can have a bit of magical leeway of like the rope can be a little bit smart, and some of the things that would just be boring you could just skip.
Yeah, it takes the chore out of it, I think, and that's the essential part. I mean, it does also. I mean, that's pretty much it for the entire game. They do escalate things in a bunch of not especially extravagant ways later on, some of which were more like work better than others, mostly because some of them cause the collision system to freak out a bit, and that is actually genuinely frustrating in a way in which I don't think the devs intended. but there's points where there's like moving handholds, which are these sort of little wood lice, essentially, that you grab onto, and they carry you up certain paths, but then slow down as you weigh upon them. So you need to change, and then there's wind becomes a factor at certain points, and but I think actually all of those feel a little kind of gimmicky and a little shallow. They do sort of like provide enough difference to keep things interesting, but the actual kind of thing that I found most exciting was that the space changes, so that you move from like external rock faces to vertical shafts within the tower, and simply because you have the addition of like loads of geometry that lies on all sides of you, the designers have a lot of extra surfaces to play with when they're creating these paths for you to think about and take. And suddenly you aren't just, looking up, you're trying to discover ways that you can ping pong up and around this negative space, and you're like plotting a much more complex route in 3 dimensions up through this space, which is very exciting. But it's also a really beautiful game visually and also sonically. Like, it has one of the most beautiful scores I've heard in a long time. But it has this. I wonder if you know if there's like an industry shorthand for the rendering style it's gone for, where it has this very crisp, low texture detail, almost no texture detail. They may be like a change of color sometimes on a texture, but it's not a million miles from how Tactical Breach Wizards actually approaches rendering the environment, where like most surfaces are a fairly single noiseless color, but then the geometric detail is accented by quite a rich rendering system. Is there a phrase for that?
You would have to ask our artist John Roberts, because I don't know how he does anything.
Let's call it the Roberts method. Even though I guess Inside also had it. So they called it something like low complexity, high rendering, or something like that. But
right.
But it looks really good, and it's got beautiful lighting gradients and lighting effects, and you really sense the temperature of the places that you're in. And there's just enormous amount of attention given to the environments as well. Like, this is a place where people lived quite complex lives, and there's this. The architecture is quite. I mean, it's visually arresting in itself, but it's also thought about to a degree what a culture would be like if it was used to a vertical living on the side of a cliff, and also like a half forgotten memory in the culture of being a seagoing people. And so there's a lot of the kind of the locations have nautical feeling things, even though there's obviously no sea to be seen, and they're all just beautifully cluttered with props, and they really nicely describe what people were doing here, and periodically find these shells which your character can listen to. And the camera cuts away to these various like still life scenes within the immediate derelict environment, and you hear all the echoes of the life that was once there. And it's really good at just wordlessly telling the story of this place in a really evocative way. But then it also chooses to tell the story of the place with a fuck ton of words as well. And it totally shatters the illusion.
Yeah, it was a little like my eyebrow went up when you said wordlessly, because I thought I'd seen like a bunch of text and stuff in this game.
Yeah, it's strange because the character never speaks. The character is just all this, but very characterful communication, even though it's wordless. And the space speaks to you so clearly but mysteriously and invitingly, and it invites your imagination and your curiosity. But then you're constantly finding these letters between people called like Bianca and Phil, and like somehow these letters contain multiple correspondences back and forth, and they're just people talking like really directly and boldly about how it sucks that there's no water anymore. And the thing is, they aren't badly written. Like, I wouldn't criticize the writing of it per se. I just think that as like a delivery for the narrative, it's not the most effective choice when they had all these other really effective choices that they'd already made.
I know developers who use environmental storytelling, and they're all cowards.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I guess there were some ways in which they felt like the player needed to know more stuff, and that was not easy to communicate wordlessly. But and
Yeah, I guess they're quite a sort of writing heavy studio in terms of their past work, right? I mean, Life is Strange anyway.
Yeah, I don't know what those people would have done on this project had they decided not to have the writing, but I don't know. It didn't really work for me. That a lot of it's written in quite a easy to understand modern vernacular as well, which is fine. Like that makes total sense as to what people would be talking about and how. But it also
do any of them say hella?
No, it's not quite that.
It's hella dry out here.
Hella dry. Yeah, but it's just enough to kind of pull you away from like walking through these abandoned ruins, this melancholic sense of wonderment that I'm, and then it's just people talking about how their kid was naughty at school or something like that. It just feels it sort of trivializes it.
How did you get on with the Outer Wilds in terms of a game that's heavy on environmental storytelling, but then also has a lot of direct text of people talking about what's going on?
Yeah, I don't remember exactly how I responded to the text in that game. I didn't get very terribly far with it because it made me feel very anxious about the challenges that I had to overcome. Yeah. Does that have a lot of kind of vernacular as well?
I was fine with it because it's the people you're discovering the writings of are all kind of engineers. It's like a kind of engineering people. And that's how they've got here. They're all like space nerds. And so all of their discussions with each other are focused on the mechanics of what's going on and what they've discovered and what projects they're working on and how. And they have a little bit of personal stuff and they make little jokes to each other and stuff. But it felt very, it just fit in the context because everything in that game is a scientific marvel and I'm fascinated by it too. And they're fascinated by it. And so it just, it all fit together.
Right. No, yeah. But I feel like a lot of what you're learning from them is, you're learning stuff from them, right? That game would be very difficult if there was none of that text in it. Is that right?
Yeah.
You are reliant on the text in some way. It's additive, I guess, is what I'm saying. Whereas I feel like most of the stuff you're reading in this isn't terribly additive in that you kind of know it's just explicit. It's just making explicit what you kind of already intuited, and actually the intuition was more satisfying than just reading it being stated in more bold terms. I feel a little bit weird about that because one of the satisfactions of reading like genuine ancient texts in translation is that people back then were just as obsessed with the sort of petty nonsense that we are today. Yeah. So there's something quite pleasing about like reading an ancient Sumerian wide boy bullshitting his debtors, or a Roman cursing a guy who's banged his missus or something like that.
Yeah. Did you ever go to the baths in Bath and see the lead messages that people had thrown in the baths?
Yeah. People were cursing hither and thither for all sorts of things.
Yeah, there was a brilliant one that was someone basically using emergent gameplay with religion, where they said a lot of them about people having their sandals or toga stolen because they're in the baths. And so the idea is you write a message to the gods, you fold it up on a piece of lead, you fold it up so that no one else can read it, then you throw it in the sacred waters, and the gods will get your message and answer your plea. And so a lot of the pleas are just like, this fucker stole my sandals, or this guy stole my toga, because those are bath-related problems. But one guy said, someone has stolen my sandals, so I bequeath them to Aquasulis, the god of water or whatever, so that she may extract vengeance. So it's like, genius. Like, I own these sandals. Someone's taken them from me. But because I still own them, I'm allowed to just give them to a god. And now you've stolen a god's sandals, motherfucker. See how that works out for you. And someone else was like, somebody stole my toga, and I'd like you to, figure out who it was and exact punishment on them. I think it was either this guy, this guy, this guy, or this guy, which is hilarious to me because they're like, well, God will be able to figure out who's guilty, but I better give them a short list. Like, they're busy. They don't want to have to look through every person who's ever lived. I better narrow down the suspects.
Well, gods were petty themselves back then. Maybe they would they probably appreciated not being put to work quite as much. Yeah, but I mean, so it's a hypocrisy, really, for me to find the stuff that's being written here too trivial. Because I mean, obviously, there is a pleasure in going through an environment and learning about how people, the kind of verite of how people used to live in the past. But for some reason, it doesn't quite strike the right tone for me here. It feels dissonant with everything else that's going on, and like so much of what's being told to you is like in the environment itself. Like, it's clear that people here left hurriedly and abandoned things they couldn't carry, but that they really cared about these spaces. And you can infer from that it must have been hard to leave. And then you pick up a letter and it goes, boy, oh boy, is it hard to leave these places hurriedly. And then you pick up another 20 that say more or less the same thing. And it just feels a bit kind of duplicative and not... I don't know, a bit redundant, but I don't know what else, because obviously there's a mechanical satisfaction of finding things in the environment. What other things can we put in the environment to engage players? Like there's little stones of rocks that you can put another rock on top of, and there are frescoes that you can look at and things like that. So there's like a collectathon aspect to it. But I think in this regard, it sort of undermines it.
I feel like you can have text. Well, what I would always want is, I like piecing things together. I like it to be a little bit of a puzzle. So I want to find things, out of order and just find, oh, this is, this guy replying to this person, but I don't know what he's replying to. And then later find out what they were replying to and sort of have that sort of light of revelation of like, this is how this fits into this piece. Rather than, it sounds like these are all pretty, just like I say, repeating things you already know and stressing things that would otherwise have been left implied.
Yeah. Do you have a philosophy yourself when it comes to where and how to do narrative? Because most of your games mechanically haven't demanded a narrative, but you've always come up with one which does feel additive and yet not obstructive at the same time.
Yeah, it's always been like primary thing to make sure it's very optional and very sort of skippable, and like you don't need to absorb it all to understand how to play the game, and if you're not interested you can just skip right past it. And Wizards is definitely like our most narrative heavy one, and there are times when if you don't read any of the conversation that happens before the mission, you won't have that much context for what you're doing, but then the objectives are still very clear. With this one, we're just trying to, it's just been like there's way too much to get through. There's too much we need to explain and need to talk about and service character arcs, and I've put a much bigger narrative burden on myself than I probably should have. And so it's just been a case of like making sure the stuff that's on the critical path is really to the point and serves only the most important beats. And then there's optional conversations that you just sort of unlock as you go, where if you're interested in what the hell this local religion is, why not talk to the member of your team who's from here and ask them about that stuff? And yeah, that we haven't done anything like Jusant, where it's sort of like, it sounds like it's almost like a collectible. It's sort of like a reward for progress. I think that stuff is, I'm interested in trying something like that. The reason that I usually try and make narrative as skippable as possible is that I am the kind of player who wants to skip it in a lot of games. Like, not every game. I love story when it's done well, but I often think it's not done well. And as soon as you lose me in a story, I never want to see any more of the story. I'm going to skip everything from then on, and you don't get another chance to get me back on board. And it's very, I'm kind of fascinated by this idea of like making story the thing that you're seeking out. That's why I love information games like the Outer Wilds and Her Story, where you have to care about the story because that's your goal, is to understand the story. And so any little scrap of new information is exciting, and it's like, oh wow, I've got to learn more about this, and you want to absorb it, and your urge to progress, rather than pushing you to skip story to progress faster, pushes you to absorb the story more deeply to progress faster. And yeah, part of that is if you wanted to weave that into a more traditional game type, then using story as a reward is one way to go. But again, this would be in the context of like a game where you're piecing the story together, so it would often be, difficult to understand in isolation, and it would all be about collecting it so that you're forming this kind of tapestry of what happened. And you need a good interface for that. The game's kind of got to be about that for that to work. I remember the Outer Wilds folks saying that they would always, because the Outer Wilds and its DLC are they're not Metroidvanias or anything. You don't need anything to progress. There is no progression really, except just what you understand. And so for everything that every treasure they put behind a locked door that you need to figure out how to get past, there's the information is the reward, but they don't know for sure that you don't already know the information, because almost everything could be figured out some other way. You could stumble into it by accident. You could just sort of intuit it. And so they try to always pair any mechanical revelation with also a sort of story payload of like, and now see, in Outer Wilds, the base game, it would be a bunch of, text, but the conversations between characters that might reveal more about them. And in the DLC, which is wordless, there are sort of pictorial depictions of what happened, sort of slideshows of things happening. So you piece together a bit more of the backstory of what happened there, just so that just in case you didn't care about this mechanical revelation, here's a bit of story payload to sweeten the deal, so you don't feel like you did this for nothing.
Yeah, I'm sure there were decisions made in production which took them down this route, probably because writing's cheap and illustration and animation are probably more expensive. But you're planning to make a roguelike at some point, right, Tom?
Yeah.
Are you planning to make a deck builder roguelike?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I love deck builder roguelikes, but when I play them, I don't think I can make one of these. I think, I don't know how this is working.
Well, I mentioned this because I've been playing a lot of Cobalt Core, and I know from the toast pop-ups on the bottom right of my screen that you play a lot of Cobalt Core as well. I was watching your you put out a little YouTube video recently about what your kind of goals for the next game were going to be. One of them was that it was going to be roguelike, and then you also had a bunch of points about how you were going to approach narrative in the next game. But like those two things, like you're always presented with, like, every roguelike I've played has come up with a very, very minutely different metaphor for why a time loop is occurring, which is obviously the case in Cobalt Core, where you're this spaceship and you're stuck in a time loop, which ultimately leads you to fight versions of yourself and stuff like this. But it's done in this very kind of glib and funny style, very lightweight in terms of the narrative. But Are there other explanations for why the game is a roguelike narratively than you are stuck in a time loop?
The plan. Well, so I have a sort of an idea for the next game that is, I don't know if it will do it because it might be overscoped. But the plan in that one, it wouldn't be a time loop. It would just be that you survive death essentially. So you do die, you lose everything. The sort of the dungeon that you're in or whatever it is very self-contained. And when you die, you find yourself back at the top, but time is not reset. You're still in the same world. And you have the memories of what you just experienced, but you lost all the loot that you picked up while you were down there, which is sort of what Hades does as well. Time is not reset in that. The home base can progress. And it's just that you are immortal, essentially.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it's not worth spending too much effort or time on it, or at least it shouldn't be a central feature of your game to try and explain this in a new way. I feel like, because it's just, players don't need an explanation. They know what a roguelike is. They're ready for it. They're not when they die and they start again, they're like, what? How is this happening?
I think Cobalt Core manages to hit that pretty well, in that it is primarily very, very funny in an extremely slight way. Should I explain what it is? Do you want to explain what it is? You're probably better equipped to explain what it is than I am.
Yeah, I can have a go. First, I should say that Cobalt Core is published by Brace Yourself Games, and I do have a professional relationship with them. I'm also friends with the developers of Cobalt Core. But it's great, and I would be saying that anyway.
Yeah.
It is a roguelike deck builder, and it's Slay the Spire meets FTL in that you are/have a spaceship, and you are/have a crew. And you're playing cards to deal damage or add shield or move your ship, which is the sort of its own unique twist. It has what it calls a one-dimensional combat system, which means that your ship can move left or right, and the guns just fire directly up, and enemy guns fire directly down. And so whether your guns are aligned with the enemy ship or not is just a factor of where the two of you are. And so if you're not aligned with them, then you need to play some dodge or evade. And that lets you just manually move your ship left or right. And then there are some cards that will automatically move you 2 spaces to the left or things like that. And so it is nice sort of chunky damage numbers like FTL. Deck building like Slay the Spire, very similar overworld to Slay the Spire. I had an interesting experience because I'm friends with I'm friends with the FTL folks as well. And we were playing, I think it actually was Cobalt Core, or we're talking about roguelike, and I was saying, oh yeah, it uses the, I think one of them said, oh, it uses the Slay the Spire, map system. And I said, oh, surely the FTL map system, isn't it? And then they reminded me that, like, no, that's not how FTL's map works. In FTL, you don't know what any of the nodes are. You get some of them are loosely classified, but it's actually just a sort of mystery map. And the Slay the Spire thing of exactly what all the nodes are, and you just got to figure out what your route is going to be through it, is very different. And yeah, Cobalt Core has that, so you can see what they all are. The one-dimensional combat system works really well. It's one of those things that's sort of really elegant in that it's very simple, but it really genuinely adds something to it. It doesn't feel like Slay the Spire. It doesn't feel like FTL. But it works with both roguelikiness and deck buildiness.
Yeah, I was expecting there to be because the way your ship looks quite modular, and the fact that the developer's previous game was Sunshine Heavy Industries, a game in which you do build modular spaceships in a spaceship's breaker's yard. I keep on thinking. I don't know if this is something that happens later in the game where you can reformat your ship at all, but at the moment, it seems like you're stuck with the one ship until you unlock other specific types of ship. Is that right?
Yeah, there are some events that there's the one that's just like, hey, do you want me to add a girder and 3 spaces into your ship? And your response is like, maybe. And then they do it, and it's just like, okay, cool. And it just means if a shot goes there, it misses. I was actually surprised in the opposite direction because I looked at the art for these ships and assumed they were, that they weren't modular, that it was all, this one cohesive whole, and then to find out that they can also, one event can swap 2 parts of your ship. And the fact that those bits can be shuffled around and it still looks good is pretty remarkable.
Oh, good. I'm glad that stuff is in there because I obviously haven't hit the RNG or played enough loops to encounter that stuff yet. I think I've won twice now. Or at least successfully completed a loop twice. So I'm only a few hours in, really. So I haven't seen that many different things.
Have you unlocked any pilots and ships?
I've not unlocked any new ships. I've unlocked character. Although I forgot to select them embarking on the new loop. So I don't know what they're actually
Because that's quite a unique thing about this, especially compared to those 2 influences, is that you pick 3 crew members and a ship at the start of your run. And those, especially the crew members, will determine your deck. And that's a lot of power to give the player in terms of shaping what their run is going to be like. And it affects the difficulty of the game a fair bit. I would say that there are some loadouts, there's some selections of crews are just going to be very difficult. Just because a crew member can specialize. One of them specializes in shields. One of them specializes in damage, basically. One of them's all about drones. And if you just didn't take any of the damage specialty characters, I think you'd probably struggle. It tends to be that damage ones are kind of the core, I would say. If you take too much damage, I don't think you're in that much trouble. I think you'll probably be able to muddle through that. But yeah, that's something I'm a little bit torn on it, where I like the freedom and I like customizing it. But I think when I think about the, Slay the Spire I've played for 800 hours, and Monster Train for I think like 200 or something. And there is actually Monster Train is arguably shares some of that issue where you don't really know what difficulty you're playing on because you don't know if the squad you selected is a bad one or a good one. So you could say like, well, it's part of the game to choose the right squad, choose a squad that's going to be effective. But then that's not really what the game wants you to do, and it's not really what you want to do because you don't want to play as the same people every time, right? You don't want to just figure out who the best squad is and then stick with that. And so that's one thing I find a little bit awkward is I kind of want to know, am I playing a hard one? Like if I pick these 3 guys and then I do really badly, is that because I just need to figure out how to play that build better, or did I just pick a really hard build?
Yeah, there's some. I mean, like I said, I'm very early in it, but there are some things about it which are quite opaque to me. I wasn't quite sure how to manage, or at least quite only just now have I had a loop where I had sufficient means to remove cards from my deck. Like all the preceding games I've played of it, very, very few opportunities to weed out cards that I don't want, and that's meant that it's been very difficult for me to kind of like employ a strategy, basically.
Right.
But I don't know if that's just something that they were somehow easing me into, or whether that's as vulnerable to RNG as I feel it is currently.
Yeah, that sounds like just bad luck to me because I find it pretty generous on removing cards compared to Slay the Spire. Like Slay the Spire, you've got to pretty much shops are the main way of doing that, and you have to pay for it at the expense of buying new cards, and the price of it keeps going up and up and up until it becomes just prohibitive. Whereas Cobalt Core, every repair yard you can do it, and it's free. You are passing up the chance to upgrade instead, or
well, that's I mean that, so yeah, I mean this I suppose that's the thing that I find emotionally tricky about it, is that like coming up with builds which throw up a bunch of really neat synergies is like the fun for me in these games, and so pruning cards down to a fun build is like core to me enjoying the game. And yet making repairs are a matter of survival. So it's it's a frustrating trade-off for me. It's like okay, you can survive in this run, but you'll enjoy it less. or you can cut the cards, but you're probably going to die before you reach the end. And I don't know if that feels quite a difficult and not essentially pleasurable decision for me to make. But then I'm a sort of odd player for these sort of games because I'm not generally so enwrapped by deck builders or roguelikes that I want to replay them endlessly until the RNG gives me the treat that I want. I basically just want treats because I have a spare half an hour to enjoy myself, which is why I've liked the deck builders that I like or have liked a lot in the past, all ones which have a finality to them. I really liked Thronebreaker, and I enjoyed Inscription because they use that deck building in service to a finite narrative arc.
Did you play Monster Train?
I played it a bit, but I felt like that was probably just going to be another forever game, which I don't have space for in my life.
It is a forever game, but it's the one that I feel like every run you get to have a crazy build. It's very generous with letting you scale, and then its difficulty comes from the fact that you have to scale. Like you have to find something crazy broken because the enemies are going to get crazy broken, and so that's a very different vibe to Slay the Spire for me. For Cobalt Core, I mean, it's interesting because I've always had a bit of a reservation about Slay the Spire's campfires, where you must choose between healing yourself or upgrading your cards, because it's a snowballing thing. Because if you don't need to heal yourself, then of course you upgrade, and then someone who's finding the run easy finds the run easier because their deck just got better. And someone who's finding the run difficult has the decision you're talking about, which is like, well, I need to heal because I'm injured, but if I don't improve my deck, I'm going to keep getting injured. And so it's kind of a snowball in either direction. It's in Slay the Spire, it's sort of, I think probably in both games the same thing is true, which is if you are needing to heal a lot at those things, probably the run is already fucked. And like it's pretty rare. In Slay the Spire, it's that's a game I find much harder than Cobalt Core, and it's rare that I use the healing thing at all. When I do, it's sort of an exceptional thing of like, oh shit, I just got really unlucky on that last fight. I'm really suffering and I'm about to go into a boss fight. I do need the health. But
So do
unless
you
it's an
tend to
absolute
play?
emergency, I'll go for the upgrade.
Do you tend to play quite conservatively then, and use a lot of evasion to avoid being hit, rather than sticking it out and trying to land shots as many as you can?
In Cobalt Core,
Yeah.
um, yeah, I guess I've generally found the game fairly easy, and then I haven't bothered going up the difficulty levels. Like I did a video on it a while back, and it was a little bit awkward because I just got a really overpowered build, and it became really clear I should have played on a harder difficulty because I was just stomping everything. I lost, I think, 2 health in the whole run, and that was from an event that causes you to overheat. That like no enemy ever hit me,
Right.
and I. That's kind of what I get out of Cobalt Core over Slay the Spire. Slay the Spire has no easy mode. There is no difficulty on which Slay the Spire is like a guaranteed win for me. Whereas Cobalt Core, especially with sort of the a fairly standard crew, I can get through it pretty reliably. So yeah, I wouldn't say I'm focusing on defense that much, but yeah, I've either got the shield guy with me or the dodge guy with me, and
Right.
go big on those. Some of the relics you can get in that game are very good, and anything that's like gives you more dodge or shield at the start of each fight is great, because
Yes.
usually once you can get off the ground, you can take it from there. And it's just like the early game can be hairy.
Yeah, the loop I'm currently on is feels very promising in that at the start of every round I get an absolute fuck ton of evasion, which doesn't expire. Right, it lasts across the course of
Yeah,
the match, so I don't actually need to spend it. And then I guess the build I'm going for is maximal shields, and shields that beget shields, and then eventually that the amount of shielding that I have can be turned into direct damage as well with another
oh nice.
card, which is very satisfying to play, because you feel like they just can't get you. Nothing they can do
Yeah.
to you can touch you, and it's very, very pleasing.
Yeah, it's quite generous in that. Of like there are some builds that are just super powerful, and also I think I have always lent into overcharge. There's 2 words for no, overdrive and power drive, right? Is that the 2? Anyway, one of them is temporary strength, and the other one is long term strength. And because the damage values in this game are like 1 or 2, having +1 to that is insane.
Yeah.
And some of them, like there's a card that multi-shot, which I think by default does 2 damage twice, or does it just do 1 damage twice? But it can be upgraded to be like that much damage 3 times. And then if you have even 1 overdrive, then you're adding 1 to it 3 times, and that's just an insane amount of damage. And so the scaling can be, I guess maybe sudden is the word. Like it's not necessarily easy because it depends on what cards you get, but when you do get it, it's going to absolutely end the fight.
Yeah, there's a particularly delicious one which does damage to your enemy equal to all of the amount of damage that they would do to you from all their various guns that turn. And then if you've got like a bunch of overdrive going at the same time, you can do like multiples of 16 of damage, which is extremely pleasurable.
Yeah, I love that stuff. I wonder if I would be pushing the difficulty more if it wasn't for that crew selection thing of like not really knowing whether the crew I selected is harder or easier. Because I could just stick with like the crew I think is best, and then see what the highest difficulty I can do with that is. Because that wouldn't necessarily lead to me playing the same crew over and over again. I might play it and then think, I kind of wish I had more, more damage or more dodge or something, and change them out. But I do feel like with unlocks, it's kind of an open question as to whether when you unlock something in a roguelike, should it allow you to be more effective, or is it there to add extra challenge? Because I think that's why I never really cared about the unlocks in FTL, is they almost all added more challenge, which makes sense because people who are doing well at the game and are playing the game a lot probably do want more challenge. But for me, with FTL, I'd unlock a new ship, I try it, and I think, oh, this is much worse than the default ship. This makes my life really hard. And some people see that as, great, a challenge, I'm going to solve this. And for me, I'm like, why would I take this? This is just a worse ship. I'll just stick with the good ship, thanks. And Cobalt Core it's much harder to say. I mean, some of the ships you unlock are just straight up better. But a lot of them are just weirder and therefore harder. There's one that every time you play the leftmost card in your hand, it moves left, and every time you play the rightmost card in your hand, it moves right. And I just breaks my brain. I just can't deal with it because I just forget about it again and again and again. And I'd be like, oh, I need to play this card, which happens to be on the left, without noticing it's on the left. I play it, my ship moves to the left. I'm like, no, that was the worst thing that could have happened. Now all my guns are misaligned. I'm going to take a ton of damage. I can't undo it. I've got nothing to recover from.
Yeah, there's been a few times where I've built up what I think is going to be the killing volley, only to launch it into thin space. It's been very frustrating.
Have you encountered that ship that dodges when you shoot it?
Yes.
I fucking hate that guy. I can't get my head around it, even when it's telling me, when this ship is, the first time you shoot this ship, it's going to move to the left far enough to avoid your shot. And so if you're shooting with the left-hand side of it, that means it's going to move really far. And your guns are going to fire from left to right. And so that's all the information you need. There's no mystery to it, but I just can't visualize it. And every time I'm surprised because it's going to move and then it's going to shoot you potentially. So it might move into a position where it can shoot you where previously it couldn't, or it might move out of a position where it was going to shoot you and now it's not. And also your first gun that fires might move it out of the way of your second gun. It's just every time it happens, I'm like, what? Why did that happen?
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a little too much for my brain to be able to simulate in advance of it happening.
Yeah, I wish it had an undo button. I was requesting that early on, but then that's a me thing. I want undo buttons and everything pretty much. Obviously there are some cards. If a card draws cards, then obviously you shouldn't be able to undo that. Anything that reveals information, but it was so common for me to just play a card and not realize what the consequences would be. Drones are. I'm always caught out by the fact that if you have a drone that you've already launched or anything that's in front of your drone bay, I'm always like, okay, so if I launch a drone now, it will destroy that thing. And if it's my own drone, that's bad. But sometimes I just need to play that card for some other reason. So I launch it and I forget that it destroys the thing that's in the way and it destroys the drone you launched. So the space ends up empty. So you're just I've just destroyed 2 of my own drones and achieved nothing. I was like, I need the undo.
Good game. I like it a lot. I like it a lot. Have you played anything else you want to talk about, Tom?
Yeah. So Graham and I play co-op games together on a semi-regular basis. And a while back, we tried Payday 3 because I've never played a Payday game. I don't think at all. Or if I have, I've never gotten to a proper game of it because it's a multiplayer focused thing and it's primarily a shooter. But Payday 3, I heard that they had added stealth. The stealth was a thing now, that there's a detection system and you can sort of walk around in plain sight for a while before you decide to go guns blazing. And so we tried that out, and it is broken in a fascinating way. It's because it couldn't be clearer that at heart it is still a shooter and it wants to be a shooter, and it's for people who like to just mow people down with assault rifles. That is the type of heist it is simulating. And that offends me personally because I love heists, but I don't like all-out gunfights. I want stealth. And so I was excited to hear that it might have some stealthy stuff in it now. But the way it works is that you start with your mask off, and that means you are just a normal civilian. Everyone's cool with you. If you walk into a restricted area, then guards won't like that, but they'll just say, hey, come with me, and lead you back to the main lobby or whatever. And then the idea is at some point you press the button to put your mask on, and then you have revealed yourself as a robber, and they will all shoot you on sight, and civilians will scream, and all that, which all makes a certain amount of sense. But then, so many actions are gated by that. So obviously you can't shoot with your mask off, makes sense. You also can't mantle. You can't climb up anything. And that makes sense if you're making Hitman, although even Hitman lets you do that. But like, if you're making a social stealth section where like you can walk around the lobby because people are allowed to be in the lobby, then okay, I shouldn't be able to clamber on the desk. If you climb on the counter at a bank, people may well assume you're robbing the place. Fair enough. But this is trying to do both social stealth and actual stealth, where there's all these alternate routes in. You can open up a window and climb in through that. You can go in through a vent. There's all the sort of Deus Ex-y stuff, except you can't without putting your mask on. And then once you put your mask on, you can never take it off again.
Oh, right.
Not only that, I mean, it's just a series of insane decisions that just like laugh out loud, wild, where the button to put your mask on, not only just pressing it again, not remove your mask, pressing it again throws a grenade. And you can imagine.
Really don't want you to go back into stealth.
You can imagine that almost any time during a heist, when I'm trying to take my mask off because I've put my mask on to climb over a windowsill, and I am not planning to shoot anyone. Nobody has seen me. That's the whole point of stealth. Nobody has seen me, and so the reason I am attempting to take my mask back off is that once I'm inside this window, there's more public areas. I can get back out to them, and I don't want to be suspect. And so when pressing that button throws a grenade instead, that is a fairly significant spanner in the works of whatever you're trying to do. And I don't know, it's the kind of weird decision that you can imagine being like, who cares, in a game that was designed around that. But the game feels like it was designed by people who didn't know that was going to be a thing, because there are all these stealthy routes, all of which require you to mantle and require you to do all these things that you're not allowed to do with your mask off. And then the fact that you can't ever take it back off when you put it on, it's just ruins everything. There's just no way to engage with this stuff in a way that makes sense. And so it did actually lead to one like briefly fun run of a mission where it's like a nightclub and we're supposed to steal some crypto shit, and if the alarm goes off before we get that, it will all be wiped. So it's very important not to set off the alarm. And there is a window you can climb in through, but of course to do that you've got to put your mask on and permanently reveal yourself as a robber. So I did that, and then I kind of climbed up into some lighting rigs and was sneaking around, and basically I could never be seen by guards again unless I wanted to cause a shootout. But Graham, meanwhile, left his mask off and walked through the nightclub as a guest and tried to do the sort of social stealth thing of trying to find a window in when people are not looking at you to use a key card or do some illicit activity. While I was up in the lighting rig and could shoot people with a silenced pistol to try and take them out of his way. And for like a brief moment, it was an almost pretty cool like game concept where like one of you is Sam Fisher and the other one is Agent 47, and you have to kind of cooperate this asymmetric way. But then it all fell apart soon after that, because the game just doesn't have, like, you can't just the whole detection logic is pretty ropey, and there just isn't the scope to like take somebody out and then dispose of their body and do it stealthily. And the fact that that there's a staircase coming up to this lighting rig that he could theoretically come up to join me, but he can't. There's like a little bit of tape across it, and you can't get past the tape without putting your mask on. Once you put your mask on, you can never take it off again. And my only theory for why this is the mechanic is that they didn't want to deal with if a guard has seen you with your mask on and knows you're a robber, and then you go around a corner and you take your mask off, and the guard comes around the corner and sees, not the mask he's looking for. Ooh, should he be suspicious of you or not? And they didn't want to answer that question, I think, or have to deal with edge cases and logic around that stuff about how suspicion is tracked, how it's, if someone communicate, if a civilian sees you with your mask on and then goes and tells a guard, can they convey enough about who you are that the guard can then recognize you with your mask off and things like that? There are some semi-awkward questions there, but I feel like if you just take those questions on and answer them all in the most player hostile way, like, yes, the guard fucking knows it's you. Like, you're still wearing the same clothes, you're still the same build, they're not fooled by the mask. If they've seen you, that's it. Mask doesn't make any difference. Because the situations that I want to work are situations where no one's ever seen me. Like, I am still, no one ever saw me with my mask on. If no one's ever seen me with my mask on, I should be able to take it back off. Also, I shouldn't need to put my fucking mask on to climb over a windowsill.
When you are revealed and people are shooting at you, are all the other players revealed as well?
No, you can be
Okay.
revealed in isolation.
So does that mean you can lure people away and then other people can move into forbidden areas without?
Yeah, it wasn't viable on the mission we were doing because, like I say, when the alarm goes off, they delete the crypto, so you just lose basically as soon as the alarm goes off. Actually, they changed the objective into a much more difficult one. But yeah, in theory, I guess we could have tried that on a different level. Have one person create a stink. The problem is once you start creating a stink, the level is just going to get worse and worse and harder.
Right.
And I would imagine that the whole thing about going into restricted areas and guards leading you gently out if they catch you probably goes out the window once guns have started to fire. Like they probably just shoot you if they see you in the wrong place.
I think the developers, didn't they? I'm sure I read a news story about them pledging to improve the game and apologizing for the terrible state in which it launched. But I don't remember. I think it was the things I read that they wanted to improve with things like the progression system, but I don't remember it mentioning anything about stealth.
Right.
But
yeah.
who knows? Maybe.
I don't get the sense that this is something that they care about, really.
Right.
Sort of like an extra back of the box feature, but not something they're super interested in making the game revolve around. And I think there might have been like server issues, and I'm sure that was part of the apology. But I think they, at this point, it's the third game of the series. I think they have a core audience who like gunning down waves of cops and aren't in there to be Sam Fisher or Agent 47, and so like pivoting into that probably doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I mean it's really just Left 4 Dead with cops, isn't it? Instead of zombies, or it used to be.
Yeah, it's insane. The number of people who show up is just kind of comical, and they just sort of teleport in all around you. And it's honestly, I mean, I like Left 4 Dead and I like shooters in general, and got no problem mowing down cops. But it's just the number of them. It's just boring. It's just like, even if I have all the ammo and just all the health to just tank all these shots and mow down hundreds and hundreds of people, it's just the same fucking thing over and over again. It just gets so dull.
Yeah, do you feel that way about Vermintide and its Darktide?
I did enjoy a bit of Vermintide. I guess when I say I like Left 4 Dead, I haven't truly loved any of those games. And it's a similar kind of problem in that I think Left 4 Dead is best when there's special infected fucking with you, and you have to creep around the witch, or a smoker's got your friend and you got to rescue them, and all of that stuff. The mowing down the hordes of zombies, it never felt good to me in Left 4 Dead. And then in sorry, I've gone blank. What game did you mention?
Darktide.
Yes.
And Vermintide as well.
Vermintide is the one I played. I like that. It feels a bit better. It still doesn't feel that satisfying to kill all the rats. There's something about the combat that's not quite, gratifying enough. The feel isn't really there. But co-op stuff with friends is inherently fun. So yeah, I've never truly clicked with any of them. I feel like Killing Claw might be my favorite of them.
Oh, really?
Because that's the one where the guns feel really good. It just feels very satisfying to mow things down. Everything has a heft to it, and it really, like, the weapons really matter. I can't remember if it does like special infected stuff where you have to rescue your friends, but I just remember having more fun with that.
Yes. Oh well, I will hope they improve it, and I also hope that somebody takes your idea of making a Sam Fisher and Agent 47 crossover game.
Yeah, I love imagining those two people specifically in the same game, and just having to have like the conversation between those two would be the most awkward thing in the world.
Well, they sort. I mean,
they sound all cool, and Agent 47 is just incredibly awkward.
It's it. I mean, they already have the Mercs versus Spy mode in previous
that was really good.
Splinter Cell games, but they've never thought of making those two asymmetries cooperate rather than being against each other.
It is a little bit tricky because I suppose, I mean, the question you asked about once one of you's revealed, are you all revealed? We did test that, and it is true that it's isolated, but it does immediately flashing ahead to all these edge cases of like, to what extent can you walk around a gunfight without anyone shooting at you? Like, is it going to just be weird? But yeah, if it's what you're making the game about, then it could be. I think you could make it fairly robust. I suppose the problem is you're just making two games, aren't you? Like, you got to have a good detection system and a good social detection system, which wasn't easy for Hitman to figure out after even 4 games in. It was struggling with it a bit.
Yeah, it's tricky. Have you been playing any other heist-based games?
Yeah, we also did revisit Monaco because I was listening to the Stealth Boom Boom podcast, which, full disclosure, I got into that podcast because they did an episode on Gunpoint, which they were very nice about. But they recently did like a Game of the Year thing where they were only talking about games that they covered that year, and they cover games in pretty random order. But they really raved about Monaco in that. And specifically, they kept saying how good the shotgun was in Monaco. And I'm like, is there a shotgun in Monaco? Like, who has the shotgun?
I don't recall that.
So it gave me the urge to go back to it. And I remembered having fun playing it with Nika, but I also remember having some issues with it. And I couldn't really remember what the issues were, except that I remember it bothered me that, again, it's also a heist game, and I have very strong feelings about heists. And I remember that it was, you never needed any of your specialists. Everyone's a specialist, but none of them are necessary because you get to choose your crew, right? So the level has to be completable no matter who you chose, and therefore the levels cannot depend on any of your abilities, and therefore you sort of feel like a bit of a spare wheel sometimes. So Graham and I gave it another shot, and that was not the problem. The problem is you just can't see anything.
Right. Yeah.
Like it's got that very sort of signature line of sight rendering look, sort of ray tracing thing, where you can only see parts of the level that your characters could see, and it's top down. So there's all these rays kind of coming out of you all the time, and as you move past pillars, those rays are going as if you're like a torch in a dark place, illuminating everything around you, which in practice is just pretty hard to read in the first place, because the stuff that's dark is not pitch black, it's like blueprinty, which maybe that's helpful. Maybe if it was pitch black it'd be worse, but it also means you kind of get a bit fuzzy about it. I can see this room, but am I seeing this room or am I just aware of the room from previously seeing it? It's really unclear which bits of the level are walls that are going to block vision and which bits are not, which is absolutely critical. And fundamentally, it just doesn't have the thing that I think every stealth game needs, which is the player has to have some information, some vision or intel or something that the enemy doesn't have, so that they can see the problem before it happens. Because if you can't see the enemies when they can't see you, then as soon as you see an enemy, like by the time you know they're there, it's too late. They've already seen you.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a bit of tolerance. They have like a certain amount of suspicion and stuff. But the problem we just hit again and again and again is it was just chaos. You just go into the level and like, oh shit, there's 3 people here. It's too late. Ah, fuck. It's all over. I got to run away. And, recovery is another big stealth game problem, where once you're detected, how do you lose detection? And here, just very unclear on how far you have to run. I thought you could just run up a ladder and hide an event and that you're fine. Graham said they would follow him up the ladders sometimes, like beat him up there. It just was always chaos. We're always blindsided by what happened. There is one class, the Lookout, who, while they're sneaking, can like see blips on the map of where enemies are. I played as them in like an early mission, and it was I guess it was somewhat helpful, but you don't know who they are, and you don't know where they're looking, and you're still missing all the vital information. Like, I just want way more information about what is happening. And I generally like games with like perfect information. I just want to see everyone, just show everybody where they're looking, their line of sight, all of that stuff, because the more information you have, the more you can plan, and the more interesting your plan can be, and the more like devious and sneaky and thiefy you can be if you know what you're going to be facing. We did find the shotgun. It's just a pickup. Really? I forgot how items work in this, which is like you can only have one item at a time. It's got this very arcadey vibe to it, which I also forgot, where you can only have one item. There's no use button. You have to nudge things to use them. Again, very, very much clashing with my heist fantasies. Money is just like glowing gold diamonds that just lie on the floor. They're just like in a parking lot. There'll just be like 5 gold diamonds, and you pick this up. That is the money in the game. That's what you get rewarded for, and it's just littered everywhere like Pac-Man dots, basically. And so we're breaking into a bank or whatever, but there's just like money on the floor. There's money in the ground outside. There's just money wherever. It just doesn't seem to care about where the money is or that kind of stuff. And yeah, you can pick up one item at a time. we didn't really understand the logic of it, because like there can be 3 shotguns and you pick up one shotgun, you can't pick up another shotgun, but then the shotgun can be spent, like it does get used up, but then I think it can recharge somehow, and I think maybe it might even be like picking up money recharges it. We couldn't really figure that out. And to jump to the thrilling resolution of this great quest we went on to discover what the Monaco shotgun was like, it's all right. It's decent. Like, if you're going to be shooting people, it's probably one of the better ways to shoot them, but it's not like super satisfying, and it just doesn't feel great in a stealth game, because by the time you're firing a shotgun, it's already gone wrong, right? It's already chaos. You can't really choose how you engage with the enemy at that point, because there's just everyone's running around and you're just going to be chased into a dead end, and then just pot luck whether you get beaten to death while you're trying to climb up a ladder before you make it out.
It's such a strange game, because I don't think it is a stealth game. It doesn't play at all like a stealth game. I think it fights all the ways in which the player might ever try to apply stealth to the situation at hand. And yet it is presenting as a stealth game. And I remember being confounded by it when it first came out, because, I mean, as you say, it's visually very difficult to read. It's just this continual strobing effect of lines of sight, which is incredibly disorienting. But it's funny you mentioned the things being on the ground like Pac-Man, because I think it is more like Pac-Man. It is more like a balls out arcade chaos game, and yet superficially it's trying to tell you to play stealthily, and the two things don't meet at all.
Have you seen the shots of Monaco 2?
I have not. No, I didn't know that was in production.
Yeah, that was announced a while ago. I just realized I can't actually check when it was announced. On their Steam page, it's just a bunch of renders of environments, like sort of not from a gameplay perspective, just like bird's eye view, but it's all just fully 3D, fully lit stuff. So I can't imagine they're going to do the same vision thing, because it would ruin this art style. I mean, maybe it still will. Like the whole level will be kind of dim and be illuminated, but it looks kind of like pretty realistic style this time. But it gives me some hope that maybe it's going to be a bit more generous with Intel, like let you see more of the environment while you're messing around with it. Oh wait, I've just seen in one of them, there's a bunch of coins lying in the corridors. So maybe not. Maybe it's going to be the same vibe.
Well, I think that's the end of the podcast. That's all the time we have. If you'd like to send us a question, you can do so at questions@crateandcrowbar.com. All these recordings are uploaded as videos to YouTube, where you can find other stuff by us. The address for that is youtube.com/crateandcrowbar. And thanks, as always, to our backers on Patreon. You can back us too at patreon.com/crateandcrowbar, or you can join our Discord community. They're lovely. The link for that is on our website, crateandcrowbar.com. That's it. I've been Marsh Davis.
I've been Tom Francis.
Farewell.
Bye.